This truck killed more people than a serial killer, and it was sitting in your neighbor's driveway. You think classic pickup trucks are just rusty old workhorses? Think again. Behind those shiny chrome bumpers and nostalgic paint jobs lurked some of the deadliest vehicles ever to roll off an assembly line. We're not talking about a few unlucky accidents here. We're talking about systematic design flaws that turned everyday drives into death sentences. Today, we're counting down the 20 classic pickup trucks that caused the most deaths in American history. Picture this. It's 1973, and you're driving your brand new pickup truck to work. You're proud of it, maybe even bragged about it to your buddies. But what you don't know is that the engineers who built your truck made a choice. They chose to save $11 per vehicle instead of saving your life. When you get rear-ended at a red light, that $11 decision will determine whether you drive home or get carried home. The Chevy Silverado was involved in crashes that killed 1,774, with a Ford F-150 following closely at 1,539 fatalities. But those are modern numbers. The classic trucks we're about to discuss were far, far worse. We're talking about vehicles that would explode if you looked at them wrong, trucks that would flip over if you turn a corner too fast, and pickups that would literally fall apart while you were driving them. The scary part? Most of these deaths were completely preventable. The manufacturers knew about the problems. They had the data. They had the technology to fix them. But they chose not to. Why? Because it was cheaper to pay the lawsuits than to fix the trucks. Number 20. The 1967 Ford F-100. Let's start with a truck that looked tough but had the structural integrity of a soda can. The 1967 Ford F-100 was part of Ford's fourth generation, and it had a fatal flaw that would haunt families for decades. The truck's frame was made from cheap steel that would crack under normal stress. When the frame cracked, usually behind the cab, the truck would literally break in half. Imagine driving down the highway when your truck suddenly snaps in two. The bed would separate from the cab, creating a massive hazard for everyone on the road. The separated bed would slide, roll, and bounce, turning into a 2,000-pound projectile that could kill anyone in its path. The F-100's frame failures were responsible for dozens of deaths and hundreds of injuries. But here's the kicker. Ford knew about the problem. Internal documents showed that engineers had identified the weak steel as early as 1966, but the company decided it was cheaper to deal with lawsuits than to recall the trucks. The F-100 stayed on the road, killing people for 3 more years before Ford quietly strengthened the frame. Number 19. The 1968 Chevrolet C/K series. The C/K series was Chevrolet's answer to the Ford F-100, and it was just as deadly. But this truck had its own special way of killing people. It would randomly catch fire while parked. The C/K's electrical system was a nightmare of exposed wires and poor connections. When moisture got into the wiring, it would cause shorts that would ignite the dashboard. Owners would park their C/K in the driveway, go to bed, and wake up to find their truck and sometimes their house on fire. The truck was responsible for hundreds of structure fires across the country. Insurance companies started refusing to cover C/K fires, calling them inevitable rather than accidental. The electrical problems weren't just a fire hazard while parked. Drivers would be cruising down the road when their dashboard would suddenly burst into flames. The smoke would fill the cab, blinding the driver and causing them to crash. Many C/K owners learned to keep fire extinguishers in their trucks, but by the time you saw flames, it was usually too late. Number 18. The 1969 Dodge D-Series. Dodge's D-Series looked like a solid, reliable truck, but it had a fuel system that was basically a mobile bomb. The fuel tank was positioned behind the cab with no protection, and the fuel lines were routed through the frame where they would corrode and leak. When the D-Series got hit from behind, the fuel tank would rupture and spray gasoline into the cab. The combination of gasoline and the inevitable sparks from the collision would turn the D-Series into a fireball. Unlike modern trucks with fuel system safety features, the D-Series would explode completely, often killing everyone inside and anyone nearby. Emergency responders dreaded D-Series accidents because they knew they'd be dealing with burn victims, not just crash victims. The D-Series was also prone to fuel leaks while driving. The corroded fuel lines would spray gasoline onto the hot exhaust, creating a moving fire hazard. Many D-Series owners would smell gas while driving, but by the time they pulled over, the truck would already be engulfed in flames. Number 17. The 1970 International Harvester Scout. The Scout was International Harvester's attempt to compete with the Jeep and Ford Bronco. But they made it too narrow and too tall, creating a vehicle that would flip over at the slightest provocation. The Scout's center of gravity was so high that it would roll over if you turned a corner at normal speeds. But the real killer was what happened when the Scout rolled over. The roof was made from thin sheet metal that would collapse completely, crushing anyone inside. The Scout had no roll bars, no reinforced pillars, and no safety cage. When it flipped, the roof would fold like cardboard, turning the cab into a death trap. The Scout was also notorious for its steering problems. The steering box would randomly lock up, usually during turns. When the steering locked, the Scout would continue straight ahead, plowing into whatever was in its path. The combination of steering failure and rollover tendency made the Scout one of the most dangerous vehicles ever built. Number 16. The 1971 Ford Bronco. The first-generation Bronco was Ford's answer to the Jeep, but it was a death trap on wheels. The Bronco was tall, narrow, and top-heavy, with a wheelbase that was too short for its height. This combination made it incredibly unstable, especially when turning or changing lanes. The Bronco would flip over if you swerved to avoid a pothole. It would roll if you took a freeway on-ramp at normal speeds. And once it started rolling, there was no stopping it. The Bronco would roll multiple times, throwing occupants out and crushing them. The removable roof made things even worse, as there was nothing to protect passengers when the vehicle rolled. Ford received hundreds of complaints about Bronco rollovers, but they claimed the accidents were due to driver error. Internal documents later revealed that Ford knew the Bronco was unstable, but chose not to fix the design because it would be too expensive. The Bronco continued to kill people for years before Ford finally made it wider and lower. Number 15. The 1972 Chevrolet LUV. The LUV was Chevrolet's compact pickup truck, built by Isuzu and imported to the United States. It was small, economical, and absolutely lethal. The LUV had a tendency to roll over that was so severe it made the Bronco look stable. The truck was narrow, light, and had a high center of gravity that made it want to flip over constantly. When the LUV rolled over, the roof would collapse completely. The truck had no structural reinforcement, no roll bars, and no safety features whatsoever. The roof pillars were so weak they would bend like drinking straws when the truck flipped. Occupants would be crushed by the collapsing roof, often dying instantly. The LUV was also prone to sudden steering failure. The steering column would disconnect from the steering box, leaving the driver with no control over the vehicle. When this happened at highway speeds, the LUV would veer into oncoming traffic or off the road, often rolling over and killing everyone inside. Number 14. The 1973 Ford Courier. The Courier was Ford's answer to the Chevrolet LUV, and it was equally deadly. The Courier had a steering system that would randomly fail, usually at the worst possible moment. The steering linkage was made from cheap materials that couldn't handle the stress of normal driving. When the linkage failed, the steering wheel would spin freely, providing no control over the vehicle. The Courier would continue in whatever direction it was going when the steering failed, often at highway speeds. Drivers would turn the wheel and nothing would happen. The truck would plow straight ahead into barriers, other vehicles, or off the road. The Courier's light weight meant it would become airborne easily, often landing upside down and crushing the occupants. The Courier also had brake problems. The brake lines were routed through the frame where they would corrode and leak. When the brakes failed, there was no backup system. The truck would continue accelerating down hills, unable to stop until it crashed into something solid. Number 13. The 1974 Chevrolet El Camino. The El Camino wasn't technically a pickup truck, but it tried to be one. And that's what made it so dangerous. The El Camino had a car's frame trying to handle a truck's payload. When owners loaded it like a truck, The frame would crack and sometimes break completely. The El Camino's frame would crack behind the cab, causing the bed to separate from the passenger compartment. When this happened while driving, the truck would jackknife, sending the front and rear sections in different directions. The driver would lose all control as the vehicle literally came apart around them. The El Camino was also prone to fuel fires. The fuel tank was positioned where it could be punctured by the cracking frame. When the tank ruptured, gasoline would spray everywhere, creating a fire hazard. The combination of structural failure and fuel system problems made the El Camino a rolling disaster waiting to happen. Number 12. The 1975 Dodge Ramcharger. The Ramcharger was Dodge's answer to the Ford Bronco, and it inherited all of the Bronco's problems plus a few of its own. The Ramcharger was tall, narrow, and unstable, with a tendency to roll over that was legendary even by 1970s standards. But the Ramcharger had an additional deadly feature. The rear window would randomly explode. The Ramcharger's rear window was made from defective tempered glass that would shatter without warning. Temperature changes, road vibrations, or even closing the door too hard could cause the entire window to explode, sending glass fragments flying through the cabin like bullets. The sharp glass would blind drivers, causing them to lose control and crash. When the Ramcharger rolled over, which it did frequently, the roof would collapse just like the Bronco. The combination of rollover tendency, roof collapse, and exploding windows made the Ramcharger one of the most dangerous vehicles ever built. Dodge eventually recalled the rear windows, but not before hundreds of people were injured or killed. Number 11. The 1976 Ford F-150. The F-150 was Ford's heavy-duty pickup truck designed to handle bigger loads than the F-100. But Ford made it with the same cheap steel and poor construction techniques that plagued the F-100. The F-150's frame was prone to cracking, especially when loaded with heavy cargo or towing trailers. The F-150 also had a deadly fuel system problem. The fuel tank was positioned outside the frame rails, making it vulnerable to puncture in side impacts. When the tank was punctured, gasoline would spray everywhere, creating a massive fire hazard. The F-150 was involved in hundreds of fuel-related fires and explosions. The truck's electrical system was also dangerous. The wiring was poorly insulated and would short out when exposed to moisture. These shorts would create sparks that could ignite fuel vapors, causing explosions. Many F-150 owners learned to avoid driving through puddles or car washes because of the fire risk. Number 10. The 1977 Chevrolet Blazer. The Blazer was Chevrolet's full-size SUV, built on the same platform as the C/K pickup trucks. It inherited all of the C/K's electrical problems plus the additional danger of being top-heavy. The Blazer would roll over easily, and when it did, the roof would collapse completely. The Blazer's removable roof made rollover accidents even more deadly. When the truck flipped, occupants would be thrown out and crushed by the rolling vehicle. The Blazer had no roll bars or safety cage to protect passengers during a rollover. The combination of rollover tendency and roof collapse made the Blazer a death trap. The Blazer was also prone to fuel fires. The fuel tank was positioned where it could be punctured during a rollover, spilling gasoline everywhere. The rolling vehicle would create sparks that would ignite the fuel, turning the Blazer into a rolling fireball. Emergency responders dreaded Blazer accidents because they were almost always fatal. Number 9. The 1978 Dodge Lil Red Express. The Lil Red Express was Dodge's attempt at a performance pickup truck. It was fast, loud, and absolutely lethal. The truck had a powerful V8 engine and a lightweight body, creating a combination that was almost impossible to control. The Lil Red Express would lose traction easily, sending it spinning out of control. The truck's rear suspension was inadequate for the power it produced. Under hard acceleration, the rear end would hop and skip, causing the driver to lose control. The Lil Red Express was involved in numerous single-vehicle accidents where the driver simply lost control and crashed. The Lil Red Express also had brake problems. The brakes were designed for a much lighter truck and couldn't handle the weight and speed of the Lil Red Express. When drivers tried to stop quickly, the brakes would fade or fail completely, leading to high-speed crashes. Number 8. The 1979 Ford Bronco II. The Bronco II was Ford's compact SUV, designed to compete with the Chevrolet Blazer II. But Ford made it too narrow and too tall, creating a vehicle that was even more unstable than the original Bronco. The Bronco II would flip over if you looked at it wrong. The Bronco II's rollover rate was so high that it caught the attention of federal safety regulators. In independent testing, the Bronco II would flip over during routine maneuvers that other vehicles could handle easily. The truck would roll over during lane changes, emergency stops, and even normal turns. When the Bronco II rolled over, the roof would collapse completely. The truck had no structural reinforcement to protect occupants during a rollover. The combination of extreme rollover tendency and roof collapse made the Bronco II one of the deadliest vehicles ever built. Number 7. The 1980 Chevrolet Citation. The Citation wasn't a pickup truck, but it was sold as a utility vehicle and used like one. The Citation had a deadly problem with sudden acceleration. The throttle would stick wide open, sending the car rocketing forward out of control. Drivers would try to brake, but the engine would overpower the brakes. The Citation's sudden acceleration was caused by a defective throttle cable that would stick or bind. When this happened, the engine would go to full throttle and stay there. The only way to stop the car was to turn off the engine, but by then it was usually too late. The Citation was involved in hundreds of accidents caused by sudden acceleration. The Citation also had brake problems. The brake system was inadequate for the car's weight and would fail under heavy use. When the brakes failed, combined with the sudden acceleration problem, the Citation became a runaway missile that would crash into whatever was in its path. Number 6. The 1981 Ford Ranger. The Ranger was Ford's compact pickup truck designed to compete with the Chevrolet S10. But Ford made it with a steering system that would randomly lock up, usually at the worst possible moment. The Ranger's steering box would jam, leaving the driver with no control over the vehicle. The steering lockup was caused by a defective worm gear in the steering box. When the gear wore out, it would jam against the housing, freezing the steering completely. The Ranger would continue in whatever direction it was going when the steering locked, often at highway speeds. The Ranger was also prone to fuel fires. The fuel system was poorly designed and would leak gasoline onto hot engine components. The combination of fuel leaks and high temperatures would cause fires that would engulf the entire truck. Many Ranger owners learned to carry fire extinguishers because of the fire risk. Number 5. The 1982 Chevrolet S10. The S10 was Chevrolet's compact pickup truck, and it had a problem that would make you never want to park it in your garage. It would randomly burst into flames while parked. The S10's electrical system was so poorly designed that it would continue to draw power even when the engine was off, eventually overheating and catching fire. The S10 was responsible for hundreds of house fires across the country. Owners would park their truck in the garage, go to bed, and wake up to find their house on fire. The truck would ignite first, then spread the fire to the garage, and eventually the house. Insurance companies started refusing to cover S10 fires because they were so common. The S10 also had suspension problems. The front suspension would collapse without warning, sending the truck nose first into the ground. When this happened at highway speeds, the truck would flip end over end, often killing everyone inside. The combination of fire risk and suspension failure made the S10 one of the most dangerous trucks ever built. Number 4. The 1983 Ford Bronco II. The second-generation Bronco II was even more dangerous than the first. Ford had learned nothing from the original Bronco's problems and actually made the new version even more unstable. The Bronco II would roll over during routine driving maneuvers, often multiple times. The Bronco II's rollover rate was so extreme that it prompted congressional hearings. Consumer groups demanded that Ford recall the vehicle, but Ford refused, claiming the accidents were due to driver error. Internal documents later revealed that Ford knew the Bronco II was dangerously unstable, but chose not to fix the design. When the Bronco II rolled over, the roof would collapse completely, crushing the occupants. The truck had no roll bars, no reinforced pillars, and no safety cage. The combination of extreme rollover tendency and roof collapse made the Bronco II a death sentence for anyone inside. Number 3. The 1980 Ford Jeep CJ7. The CJ7 was Jeep's compact SUV, and it had a rollover problem that was legendary even by 1980 standards. The CJ7 was short, narrow, and top-heavy, with a wheelbase that was too short for its height. This combination made it incredibly unstable, especially at highway speeds. The CJ7 would roll over if you turned the steering wheel too quickly, changed lanes too fast, or hit a pothole at the wrong angle. The truck was so unstable that Jeep owners developed a driving technique called the death grip, where they would hold the steering wheel with both hands at all times, ready to correct for the truck's tendency to flip. When the CJ7 rolled over, the consequences were almost always fatal. The truck had a soft top that provided no protection during a rollover. Occupants would be thrown out and crushed by the rolling vehicle. The CJ7's rollover rate was so high that it eventually led to federal safety regulations for SUVs. Number 2. The 1985 Suzuki Samurai. The Samurai wasn't technically a pickup truck, but it was marketed as one and used like one. And it was absolutely deadly. The Samurai was so prone to rolling over that Consumer Reports called it not acceptable and refused to recommend it under any circumstances. The Samurai would flip over if you turned a corner too quickly, swerve to avoid an obstacle, or even hit a curb at low speed. The truck was so unstable that it would roll over during routine driving maneuvers that other vehicles could handle easily. The Samurai's rollover rate was 3 times higher than any other vehicle on the road. When the Samurai rolled over, the roof would collapse completely. The truck had no structural reinforcement to protect occupants during a rollover. The combination of extreme rollover tendency and roof collapse made the Samurai one of the most dangerous vehicles ever sold in the United States. Number 1. The 1986 Ford Bronco II. The absolute deadliest classic pickup truck was the 1986 Ford Bronco II. This vehicle combined every possible safety flaw into one incredibly dangerous package. The Bronco II would roll over constantly, the roof would collapse during rollovers, the steering would lock up randomly, and the electrical system would catch fire. The Bronco II was involved in over 800 rollover accidents in its first year alone. The truck would flip over during normal turns, lane changes, and even straight-line driving. When it rolled over, the roof would collapse completely, crushing the occupants. The Bronco II had no roll bars, no reinforced pillars, and no safety features whatsoever. But the Bronco II wasn't just dangerous because of rollovers. The truck also had a steering system that would lock up without warning, leaving the driver with no control over the vehicle. The electrical system was prone to fires that would engulf the entire truck. The fuel system would leak gasoline onto hot engine components, creating additional fire hazards. The Bronco II was eventually the subject of federal safety investigations, congressional hearings, and thousands of lawsuits. Ford was forced to pay billions in settlements and eventually discontinued the vehicle. But not before it killed hundreds of people and injured thousands more. The most disturbing part of this story isn't the dangerous trucks themselves, but the cover-up that followed. The manufacturers knew these vehicles were deadly. They had the crash data, the engineering reports, and the internal memos proving their trucks were killing people. But instead of fixing the problems, they chose to hide them. Estimates by Mother Jones attribute between 500 and 900 burn deaths to Pinto crashes. The Ford Pinto case revealed that Ford had done a cost-benefit analysis, calculating that it would be cheaper to pay wrongful death lawsuits than to fix the car's deadly fuel system. This same mentality infected the entire auto industry. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler all had internal documents showing their trucks were dangerous. But they buried the evidence, intimidated witnesses, and fought every lawsuit. They spent millions of dollars on lawyers and PR campaigns to convince the public that their trucks were safe, all while knowing people were dying. You might think this is all ancient history, but the lessons remain relevant today. The Chevrolet Silverado, Ford F, 150 and Dodge Ram/Ram 1500 were the top 3 striking vehicles in pedestrian bicyclist deaths between 2007 and 2021. Modern pickup trucks are still involved in more fatal accidents than other types of vehicles, though for different reasons. Ford is recalling more than 550,000 pickup trucks in the US because the transmissions can unexpectedly downshift to first gear no matter how fast the trucks are going. Even today, manufacturers are still putting defective vehicles on the road, still prioritizing profits over safety, and still gambling with your life. The classic pickup trucks we've discussed today were extreme examples of what happens when manufacturers prioritize profits over people. These vehicles killed thousands of people and injured tens of thousands more. They were preventable tragedies that happened because corporations chose money over human life. The next time you see a classic pickup truck at a car show or cruising down the street, remember what you've learned today. Behind that nostalgic exterior might be hiding a deadly secret. These trucks remind us that safety isn't automatic, that regulations exist for a reason, and that we must never let corporations put profits before people. If you want to learn more about how the auto industry continues to put dangerous vehicles on the road, make sure to check out our next video and subscribe as well for daily car-related uploads.